When the militia attacked Jean's village, everything changed.
They
came at night. They caught me and took me away. We arrived at the militia camp in daylight. I didn't know how to get back home. I was afraid because I was still a child.
How old, we ask?
I was 9.
At 9, he had become a soldier. Jean is not his real name. We were asked to protect his identity. Before long, he says, life in the brutal FDLR militia became almost normal.
They used to assign jobs to us. If they assign you to cook, then you cook. Or if it is time to look for food, then you look for food. Or if it is time to fight, then you fight.
When he got old enough to carry a gun, commanders taught him how to use it.
We used to live a life of war. Sometimes we were attacked and ran away, and we would come back and just fight and fight. Sometimes we would attack. That is how my life used to be.
Each time Jean tried to escape, he says, they caught him and beat him mercilessly. 3 weeks ago, he succeeded, sneaking to a UN military base before dawn. It had been 6 years. Now he's at a transition center for former child soldiers.
The way they're treated, they lose their humanity.
The center director says many of the boys were given alcohol and drugs to get them to fight.
The place for the children is in the family and the school. When you use a child less than 18 years, they're like a robot. If you tell them execute or kill, they will do that because they don't have any military discipline.
The boys here fought on different sides of Congo's brutal conflict. Now they're learning to play together and dance together, recapturing a little of their innocence. More than 30,000 child soldiers have gone through centers like this one. Jean says he hasn't made any friends yet, but it's still better than the beatings and patrols.
I just want to live well and stay with my parents so that I can go back to school so I can get a better life.
He's learned the life of a soldier. Now he hopes to regain the life of a child.
Imperialism, which today is waging war against a genuine struggle for human liberation, sowed seeds of decay here and there that must be mercilessly rooted out from our land and from our minds. We shall deal here with the problem of mental disorders born out of the natural war of liberation waged by the Algerian people. And the clip was an example, but I will also tie this into PTSS for Black people in America. Perhaps the reader will find these notes on psychiatry out of place or ultimately in a book like this. There's absolutely nothing we can do about that. We had no control over the fact that the psychiatric phenomena, the mental and behavioral disorders emerging from the war, have loomed so large among the preceptors and pacification and the pacified population. The truth is that colonization in its very essence already appeared to be a great purveyor of psychiatric hospitals. Since 1954, we have drawn the attention of French and international psychiatrists and scientific works to the difficulty of curing a colonized subject correctly. In other words, making him thoroughly fit into a social environment of the colonial type. In other words, making him fit thoroughly into a social environment of the colonial type. Because it is a systemized negation of the other, a frenzied determination to deny the other any attribute of humanity, colonialism forces the colonized to constantly ask the question, who am I really? Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, continuing my reading of Frantz Fanon's book, The Wretched of the Earth. And I'm picking up on the chapter War and Mental Disorders, starting on page 181. This chapter goes along with this clip. This was a great clip that I found of the young man giving this experience of being a child soldier, but also talking about the mental disorders or the mental weight it the mental weight that he had upon himself, what happened to him mentally? PTSD. PTSD and a host of other things that come from witnessing all of the death and being a child soldier himself. So we're linking that to what we're reading here in Frantz Fanon's book, but we're also linking that to what Black Americans experience here in America that caused us the PTSD, the epigenetics of our trauma, right? So all of these things are being linked together. So yes, Dr. Joy DeGruy, her book PTSS, I'll put that in the description. If you don't have it, you should have it. If you watch this channel, you should have her book. But if you don't, I'll put that book link in the description. So therefore we can link these things together, right? Because it all goes together. But Frantz Fanon is talking about what happened to Africans being colonized on the continent. But we're also linking that to, we're looking at the overall behavior of the colonizer, i.e. white supremacist, and looking at the psychological effects that they had on the Black people, the traumatic effects that war and violence have had on Black people. So we're going to read some, I'm going to do some reading, but this chapter is a bit different because this chapter is filled with case studies. So I have about 3 case studies that I'll read from different sections. So there are different, let me find it. Look at this case study number 2. So there are different sections in this book that give case studies under specific topics. And so under specific series, I just need to find it. So under specific series, there's series A, B, C, D, E. So under these specific series, their case numbers. And so I'm going to read a case for each series so we can get a good understanding of how war and violence have caused the mental disorders or the setbacks in the lives of the people who were victims of these violence. But also linking that to what we experience here in America, the violence that we've experienced here in America and the environments that are violent and how it has contributed to our PTSS. So let's continue page 182, second paragraph. The defensive positions born out of this violent confrontation between the colonized and the colonial constitute a structure which then reveals the colonized personality. In order to understand this sensibility, we need only to study and appreciate the scope and depth of the wounds inflicted on the colonized during a single day under colonial regime. We must remember in any case that a colonized people is not just a dominated people. Under the German occupation, the French remained human beings. Under the French occupation, the Germans remained human beings. In Algeria, there is not simply domination, but the decision literally to occupy nothing but a territory. The Algerians, the women dressed in hikes and palm groves, the palm groves and the camels from a landscape, the natural backdrop for the French presence. A hostile, ungovernable, and fundamentally religious nature is in fact synonymous in the colonies with the bush, the mosquitoes, the natives, the disease. Colonization has succeeded once this untamed nature is brought under control. Cutting railroads through the bush, draining swamps, and ignoring the political and economic existence of the native people are in fact one and the same thing. When colonization remains unchallenged by armed resistance, when the sum of harmful stimulants exceed a certain threshold, the colonized defenses collapse, and many of them end up in psychiatric institutions. In the calm of this period of triumphant colonization, a constant and considerable stream of mental symptoms are direct sequels of this oppression. Today, the all-out national war of liberation waged by the Algerian people for 7 years has become a breeding ground for mental disorders. So when I'm reading this, I'm thinking about what I see on a regular basis. I do a lot of community work here in Tallahassee, especially through my safe sex lane. Like I'm outside of being the Black History Man, I'm the safe sex man, right? Because I've already told y'all that my 2 fronts We're looking at the 9 areas of human activity where white supremacy dominates. My two fronts are sex and education, right? So when I'm out in the community, I often see our people, Black people, suffering from mental disorders, suffering from untreated mental disorders. And oftentimes, if I get a chance to talk to these people, because these are the people in the community that we're serving, right? So when I get a chance to talk to these people, and if they're in the best state of their right mind that they can be when we're having a conversation, they're giving me information about what factors led to their mental state being what it is. And of course, a part of this conversation is to link them to care, link them to mental health care so we can help improve their mental health. But a lot of their mental health issues have come from the circumstances, come from their environments, come from what they've seen, what they've witnessed, what they've experienced. Violence, trauma, poverty, low self-esteem, all of these things, they weigh down on our people. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. And we're already carrying the epigenetic history, the epigenetic trauma of America, of these 400 or 500 years that we've been in America. And the real trauma, the root trauma has never been treated. So yes, some of us as individuals, you'll go to therapy like you should, and your individual trauma is healed, but our collective trauma has yet to be addressed as a nation, as a people. And I think you should continue to go and address your individual trauma. But at some point, we're all going to have to get together to address our collective trauma. And in not addressing this trauma, we see a lot of our people are mentally wounded. A lot of our people are afflicted. A lot of our people need help. They're crying out for help. And a lot of us are looking at them. A lot of people are afraid of them. A lot of people are unwilling to help them. They're the crazy people. They're the people who, well, we gotta back away from them. We can't really talk to them. We got to get away from them. Like, those are the people who need help. Remember, Neely Fuller said we're helping those who need the most constructive help. So those are the people that we need to be helping. Those are the people that we need to be linking to resources. How are you a resource to the people within your community, right? But overall, looking at how trauma negatively affects a person's mind. So the young man in the clip was talking about actually being a part of war. So there are those of us who have seen violence by proxy, like myself. I've never been in a shootout, but I've been in the environment where the shootout was plenty of times, right? I've never seen someone actually shoot, but I've seen the aftermath of someone being, So I've seen violence by proxy. I've never been up close in the violence. I've never been up close in the war. That's a whole nother different experience. I don't want none of it. I ain't even gonna lie to you, I don't want none of it. But this is this young man giving his experience of being actually in the war as a child after witnessing his family being deleted. And then having to be a part of these wars himself and how it messed up his mental. Like he talked about, having the nightmares, having the flashbacks and all these things, probably dealing with insomnia, anxiety, depression, all these different things. So this is the stuff that we're getting into today. All right. So, so Frantz Fanon goes on to say, another well-established notion that deserves, in our opinion, to be reevaluated is that these psychiatric reactions are relatively benign. Anniversary reactions, in other words, cases where the entire personality has been definitively dislocated, have, of course, been described but always and as exceptional cases. We believe, on the contrary, that the pathological process tend, as a rule, to be frequently malignant. These disorders last for months, wage a massive attack on the ego, and almost invariably leave behind a vulnerability virtually visible to the naked eye. And all evidence, the future of these patients is compromised. The following example will illustrate our standpoint. In a certain African country, independent for some years now, we've had the opportunity of treating a patriot and former resistance fighter. The man in his 30s would come back and ask us for advice and help, since he was being afflicted with insomnia together with anxiety attacks and obsession with suicide around a certain date in the year. The critical date corresponded to the day he had been ordered to place a bomb somewhere. 10 people had perished during the attack. This militant, who never for a moment had thought of recanting, fully realized the price he had to pay in his person for national independence. Such borderline cases pose the question of responsibility in the context of the revolution, but it also points to actual outcomes, actual effects that actually happen to people when people are placed in traumatic situations.